Welcome to the Music Journal podcast, where we talk about the hottest things happening in music right now, and also how you can apply it if you're an aspiring producer or musician yourself. I'm your host, Wes Yee. I'm a producer, artist, and educator, and I'm stoked to be chatting with you. Let's make history. Welcome to another episode of the Music Journal podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Jules Schroeder. And Jules is a pretty amazing person all around. She built her first six-figure business when she was only 18 years old, her first seven-figure business at 22, and she's on the Forbes list of the 30 most influential people under 30. She's also a really talented singer and artist, which is why I wanted to get her on the Music Journal. And she can actually make up songs on the fly, while people like me, and I'm sure many of the listeners, will literally sit down for hours and come up with literally nothing. And believe it or not, she's had a pretty crazy near-death experience as well that kind of started this whole journey. I kind of jumped from 0 to 100 there. But I'm sure all those gaps will get filled in this episode. So Jules, welcome to the Music Journal.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here. And it's definitely been a ride the last few years for sure. So
absolutely. Like any entrepreneur or musician, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if it ever changes necessarily, like the high highs and the low lows, but I feel more normal and welcoming of the journey.
I feel like that's part of the whole unconventional life theme, which is actually the name of Jules' show, for those of you who don't know. I feel like that's kind of part of being an entrepreneur, is experiencing really high highs, but then everything kind of has to balance, where if you kind of take a more conventional life, it's a lot more, I guess, in the middle throughout. So whichever one you decide to embark on, whichever journey, I guess, is up to you. But I'm totally with you on experiencing the high highs and the low lows. Do you want to tell the story about your near-death experience?
Yeah. So it all started a few years ago, and literally, it was a wakeboarding accident. This was in 2015 in the summer. Full on, just to give a little backstory, where I was at my life at this point. So I started my first six-figure company at 18, seven-figure company at 22. At 24, I had a team of 25. We were making books bestsellers on Amazon, figured out the Kindle algorithm back then. Long story short, a business partner embezzles a bunch of money, go into $200,000 worth of debt, slowly lose everything that I thought was important to me, all the status. My relationship was to my other business partner, the one who didn't embezzle. And after 8 months of this, just started to ask myself the real questions of, who am I really, without all the things or pillars of success that I thought I was striving for, the fame, the recognition, the acknowledgement, the bank account. And it was in this process, this was actually about a year before the near-death experience, that I started to finally kind of come to terms with what is my life and what is actually creating a life that really inspires me, not just living a life based on someone else's expectations. And I think you said it beautifully. It's we grew up in this model: go to school, get good grades, get a good job, go to a good college, get a better job, and then eventually you die, which I don't think is interesting to any of us, which is why we're on the show. Right. And so this whole process started happening for me of just being in this inquiry, asking these questions. And then, I had this near-death experience a year later. And I just remember face planting, hitting the water. I knew I was messed up at the time, but was also, had been a sponsored snowboarder, extreme athlete. So another life phase of mine. I've been very multi-passionate. And so I knew, I was okay, I definitely feel hurt, but I didn't think I was seriously messed up. And then I got off the boat and just remember everything starting to go numb. And I don't remember anything after that. But I remember coming out of the MRI in the hospital, and I was approached by this white figure and 6 Black Shadow Council member. And we had this conversation, and it was, Jules, you have more work to do in the world. Do you want to do it? And at the time they thought my neck was broken. They thought I was paralyzed. And I just remember saying yes, as long as I don't come back to the vegetable. And then in that next moment, I felt this energy forge my neck back together, shot back into my body, felt this energy shoot down my spine. And the moment that I woke up, everything altered. And it was life before was very much being created by me, and life since that moment, a few years ago, has been coming through me. And, you mentioned it in the introduction, but literally it was like 3 weeks later, I get a call from the UN and I'm like still in a neck brace. And they're like, do you want to come be a global ambassador for education? I was like, it's not really the best time. Kind of just had this like crazy accident. But I'm like, when the UN calls, I'm like, yeah, sure. I'll be there. And then, I'm on my way there. And Forbes is like, I hear what you're doing at the UN. We'd love for you to come to 30 under 30. And then, a few months after that, they were like, we'd love for you to start writing for us. I had no blogging experience at the time. And then I just shared, I have this vision for this company called Unconventional Life. And I want to just tell stories, which we have the Unconventional Life podcast, people following their own non-traditional paths. And they're like, great, make it the official podcast on Forbes 30 under 30. And so, ever since that moment, the start of 2016, life has been flowing like dominoes. And, since we've been, we've reached millions of people in over 75 different countries, ranked one of the top podcasts for entrepreneurs the last few years. And, simultaneously from a music perspective, I really unleashed this whole gift of, like you said, channeling is how I call it in the moment, creating songs on the fly. And I've got to do it, with some pretty amazing people, with different Grammy award-winning artists. I've gotten to do it at the UN, for diplomats, for global leaders around the world. And so I honestly think back to those words a lot, like, you have more work to do. Do you want to do it? And like what I actually was saying yes to, because there's some days where I'm just like, holy crap, that is a lot. And so there's definitely been a lot of success. And it's also been like, I find to just as much success, like we often just see and hear the success, there's been just as much willingness to sit in resistance and failure and feel and like cut space and release things from my life that weren't in alignment with where I was going. And so just holding both perspectives as I've been in this crazy journey over the last few years. So
It's a really powerful and amazing story. I have a lot of questions about it. I'm going to try to get to as many of them as I can. First of all, I think it's so funny how you kind of made a bargain with the devil, if you will. It kind of shows your entrepreneurism, just kind of like, oh, I'll come back and I'll do that if I don't come out a vegetable. So it was a hell of a bargaining chip, I think. I guess the biggest question I have about it is what was the actual mind shift, do you think, that you had like pre near-death experience to post near-death experience, and if it's, I guess, replicatable by somebody who hasn't had a wakeboarding accident or anything like that?
Yeah, great question. So for everyone hearing this, like, you definitely don't have to like kiss death to to get kind of some of the pieces. And I think if I were to say it from a mindset perspective, I think as a society, we inherit a lot of conversations, and it could be like, being an entrepreneur is risky. Being an artist, you'll inherently be broke or you won't make as much money. And so there's a lot of these like constraints that at least I know I have inherited, and I've had to like conditioning that I've had to untease, or even looking at like what success is. Even though I had a lot of success at a young age, I never could receive or enjoy it. It was like, I'd be like, cool, I'm going to hit this number in my business. And then I'd hit it. And by the time I hit it, there was already another goal, and there was another goal. And so I found like I kept false summiting a lot, and I never got to actually experience, like, never felt like there was enough time in the day. I never felt like I was where I was supposed to be. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to this. Like, it's just like this constant unrest that can live, and it's like, especially as millennials, it's like you see people that are like years younger than you, or artists that have like done it 10 years ago, and it's like, who am I? And so it's like, should I even be doing this? Am I even good? Like, do I have something valuable to say? And so this is out of what life was like for me, before I had this accident. And I've also spent a lot of time working on myself too, before the accident, like years doing personal development stuff. And I think the biggest shift was really just recognizing that, like, I used to think in order to find success, and then I had to hustle really hard. I had to put in a lot of hours, and I was constantly like trying so hard to prove myself and to just make things happen. It would be like constant outreach, or saying yes to so many projects that didn't pay me enough worth, just waiting for this break or this opportunity to happen. And I was exhausted. I didn't take very good care of myself at all. Frankly, I wasn't super happy. And like, I was doing what I thought I should be doing, but my direct enjoyment and fulfillment in doing it was not very high. And since then, what I've learned is really the access that I think to making results and breakthroughs happen in a much like more accelerated way isn't this like day-to-day hustle, work hard mentality. But for me, I actually live my life now where I call it, it's like either a hell yes or it's a no. Like, it's like, if it's not a 10 out of 10, I'm not a yes to it. And I actually would rather sacrifice a 7 or an 8, even a 9 for a 10. And that takes a lot. Like, it's really, in this world, like, it's so easy to want to just say yes to the things that you think can be the break. But I find that you end up draining your energy and your resources, and you're not actually acting with things that are truly aligned. So as a result, you end up getting more opportunities that are kind of good or kind of aligned, but not totally epic. And, by nature of the accident, one, I didn't have as much time because I was healing. And so I was forced to actually say no to a lot more things. And it had me start to listen and wait. And I find we all have intuitive wisdom inside of us. And if you don't use the word intuition, you can think about it like instinct. We all have instinct that lives in us. And it's this knowing when something's right, or when you have something, like a lot of you might wake up in the middle of the night or like different points of the day where you feel like you have some more potential in you, and you just can't yet point to what it looks like on the outside. There's not just that external representation or validation for the knowing that you have in you. And so I started since, to really give myself the space to listen, to trust that actually we have everything we need in us. I actually work only like 4 hours a day, and I get more done and do more initiatives than I did when I was working 14 hours a day. And I prioritize self-care. I prioritize feeling good because I find the more resourced I am, the more that I can show up. And simultaneously, like, there's no right way. There's no right path. Like, someone else's path, someone else's vision is their path and their vision. And when you can kind of just trust and surrender, like, especially if you're dealing with stuff right now, that everything is in order, it is all perfect, it's all happening, it's all already happening right now in this moment, then I found, at least for myself, it gives me more permission to just choose and to act more in integrity. And ultimately, it's created just a lot more exponential shifts. So long and the short of it, really releasing those old patternings and conditionings before. And then, since then, really stepping into this new place of trust, surrender, and ease based on this instinct and intuition.
Wow, that's fucking incredible. I feel like you just gave a whole like Bible on how to live life properly. It's crazy to me how much we have in common too. I was actually a sponsored skateboarder at one point too, which kind of cycles back to the whole snowboarding thing. But aside from that, from what you just said, we have literally identical definitions of success, which I feel like go against a lot of other people's definitions of success. Like, a lot of people I grew up with, they're all about the dollar signs. They're all about just making as much money as humanly possible. And there's more to it than that. And I feel like if you haven't had some sort of experience to make you realize that, or you don't listen to shows like this or practice personal development, you do end up kind of becoming unfulfilled and burnt out. Because I know people who are older than these people who say this too. And when I talk to them, I literally see the younger people's future when I speak to them, and they're burnt out and they're tired all the time, even though they're making a ton of money. It's not really enough. So I think happiness is definitely a huge part of success. I feel like our society also kind of separates success and happiness. Like the success is within your career and your job, which you spend so many hours slaving away at, right? Unless you're doing the 4-hour work day or work week or whatever. And then your happiness is everything outside of that. So I feel like people who do conventional life stuff get stuck in this mentality that you don't really need to be happy to be successful. As long as you have that monetary component, you're successful. And then the happiness kind of is separate, but in actuality, they're kind of synonymous. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. And I found that to be totally true in my own life as well.
What would you recommend to somebody who's thought about looking into personal development? Like, who are some of the people that you first started researching and really getting into it?
Yeah. Well, I think like, several of the things that you're saying too, it's like this conventional wisdom teaches us, to compartmentalize like who we are, even as musicians, it's like music's the thing that I love doing. And then I got to make money. So like, here's all the other like shit that I do with my time. And there's nothing wrong with that by any means, but I find that really like embracing this like and reality, that it doesn't just have to be compartmentalized. Like these are my people at work. These are the people that like I hang out with. These are the people that I do music with. These are the people that, whatever. I find that the more I've just allowed it to all be included and ultimately allow all the expressions of myself to be included, I find like a lot of us sometimes we're like, I don't want these people to see this part of me or those people to see that part of me, that it's been in revealing more of myself and more of my vulnerability, like not just sharing the highs, but also sharing the lows. That has been a gateway. And so just for those hearing this as well, like it's this and inclusion reality that I find is so big. But, coming back to your question, like I had a really intense childhood. Like I, worked 3 jobs when I was 15, moved out of the house when I was 17, was like living on my own, just did not get along with family. I was the oldest of 5 girls. Just had a lot of rocky, intense like abuse experiences that happened, got into drugs, got into partying, and just like by the time I like turned like 17, 18 was like figuring my life out. I feel like I like the ages of like 14
kind of forced to grow up kind of fast, right?
Yeah, I grew up really, really fast. And by the time I was 18, I had a lot that I was walking, into. And simultaneously, I always had like straight A's, photographic memory, like, from the outside, it looked like I was still doing really good, even though internally, like it was a completely different story. And this is something I see a lot in our world too. And like, a lot of us, especially as performers or creatives and artists, our internal struggle can be really intense. And for me, it's been really lonely and really isolating at times, because from the outside, people are like, wow, like you're doing all this great stuff. And like your life just looks so perfect. But then it's like, yeah, but I'm also dealing with shit. And one of the reasons why I love personal development work is it's given me more tools. And I started at 18 with something called the Landmark Forum, which they have like all over the world. It was this 3-day seminar, essentially helping me get complete with all the things that happened in the past that were actually impacting how I was showing up in the present, that were simultaneously creating the future I was living into, even though it hadn't already happened. And so through that course, really got to kind of get a set of tools to ultimately navigate, this emotional volatility, or to navigate this like outsider imposter syndrome thing that I was like occasionally being with, or this, loneliness that I was feeling. And so I found that the more I've worked on myself, the better I've become at communicating. Ultimately, the better I've become at revealing and sharing myself, and actually saying, hey, it's okay to ask for help, or it's okay to get supported by people, and that people genuinely like get lit up through supporting. And it actually really matters, for people to be able to contribute to you as well. And so, so these tools have been really impactful, and I've done something, called authentic relating and circling training, and, read a lot of different books. But more than anything, I think some of the biggest secrets that I found in personal development and looking at yourself is that like, at the end of the day, like you go to bed with you and you wake up with you, like every single day. Like no matter what you're doing in your life, no matter what you're up to, no matter how successful or not, like you are the common denominator through all of it. And so if you're always going to have you, why not actually invest in like really learning to love you, like really learning to like you? And that shift has made such a difference for me in what I will and won't put up with. Like I call it energetic discernment of like, no, like I'm worth more, or even knowing your value. Like actually I'm worth to be paid for like the value I'm bringing. Yeah, my music makes impact. I'm worth that. And so that relationship, especially for those that maybe are starting to cultivate it, like I doubled down on my investment there. And that one has been, paying off tenfold above everything else.
Yeah, preach. Seriously. I have 2 younger sisters. The youngest one is 17, and I was talking to someone recently because she also has a younger sister, and they're literally glued to their phones. And what my friend was saying about her sister is that she'll make a post on Instagram or Facebook or something, and if it doesn't get more than like, I don't remember the number, like 10 likes in the first 20 minutes or whatever, she'll just delete the post. And it's so crazy how hard it is to be vulnerable. Because you think I've been there too, and this is something that I actually overcame pretty recently myself. You think that if you tell people all these vulnerabilities and all these things that are wrong with you, that they're gonna think differently and more negatively of you. But it kind of humanizes you in a sense, and that's a really powerful thing, to be seen as a human in somebody else's eyes. So I think it's really cool that you were able to make that shift. And anybody who's listening who's also working on that, I agree 100%, and that's something that's definitely worth working on. Would you say that? So I guess first of all, were you a musician before your accident?
Yeah. So music's always been like a thing of mine. Like I actually did American Idol when I was 16. And
Oh, really?
yeah, I was in Boston, got down to 200 people. I actually smoked cigarettes at the time. So I got past all these rounds. And one night I was so nervous. I smoked like a pack of cigarettes, totally shot out my voice. And the next day they were just like, so do you smoke? And I was like,
Oh, shit.
yeah. And they were like, you should come back when you're not doing that. And I was like,
Congrats on quitting. First of all, I've been there too.
Yeah. Well, actually, I like full on started at 15 and stopped at like 18. So it was a short-lived addiction that was potent. But yeah, I mean, so it through that addition. And so I've always been musical, like even through college, I was booking bands and performing, with different artists and things like that, but also business, and it was constantly this struggle for me where the business identity felt safer. My dad was like, I remember when I told him I wanted to pursue music full time, he was like, yeah, it's like a hobby. He was like, you really think you have what it takes? Like somehow being like a musician, is so unattainable for people. Like you have to like make it in the 1%, in order to just to have made it. And so at the time though, I didn't have the tools, and I was like, yeah, Dad, you're actually kind of right. And so music really took this backseat for me. It was really this hobby, and it's always been this piece of my identity that I've been most shy about, and it's been most vulnerable to me up until recently. And it hasn't really inhibited me from taking action, but I think now I'm in a period of my life where it's not like, it's like I'm a businesswoman and I do music as well. It's like leading with being like a musician and a visionary and an entrepreneur. And it's actually through my music now that business and transformation gets to happen first. And so that shift has been recent in the last few years, especially since the accident. And I think more than anything, it's had me just own another level of my gift, and it's like, just because music hasn't historically for me been the most predictable path, in terms of like making money and a living and like identity and feeling like I'm actually doing something worth my life. It's now shifting where it's like seeing, well, where's actually the place that I feel the most joy? And I asked myself this question, a few months ago. I was like, how happy, like what is my direct day-to-day experience of feeling joy and happiness? Like if I look at each moment, because so often it's like we have this idea of being happy, like, oh, I'll finally get to take this trip and then I'll be happy. Or like if I can just get a few like $100 or $1,000 more, then I'll be happy. Then I can relax. Or like if I get this gig, then I'll be happy. And when I really looked at it, like my day-to-day time spent happy, I think I was only happy about like 30% of the time, like actively, directly, experientially, not just like the idea, but direct experientially. And I realized, I ranked everything I was doing in my life on a 1 to 10 scale, 10 being like pure epic happiness, 1 being like, I hate my life and like, I should totally stop doing that immediately. And when I did my whole ranking system, I found that the only things that gave me like 10 out of 10 were when I was performing live or when I was channeling or doing talks. And then also when I was CrossFitting. I was a CrossFitter. And I looked at most of the stuff. Yeah, totally. I looked at where most of my time was going, was actually the things that were like 6s or 7s for me. And I began to really start prioritizing my life. And for those that are listening, I highly recommend doing this. Like literally look at where you're actually spending your time, like really tell the truth. Like you wake up in the morning, like what are you actually doing? And give it a ranking on like a 1 to 10, from 10 to pure joy and 1 to just not so much at all. And when I started to actually really be in relationship with it, it became clear. It was like, okay, this is what I'm doing full time. And, since then now I'm working with some like Grammy nominated artists on a new album just started coming out, performing at a few big music festivals. We're going to be doing like an online virtual music summit in October. So like all these music focuses have shifted just as a result of getting real with what's happening rather than the idea of what's happening. And so once again, coming back to this question, personal development, like these are all the tools that I've had to be able to step back and witness my life while also getting to be like an active participant.
Mm. As you were telling the listeners to try the scale of 1 to 10 thing, I was literally thinking in my head, I was like, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna write down all the things that I do every day.
Yeah, game changer, total game changer.
So it's pretty crazy that you had the identity of being a businesswoman and an entrepreneur and a musician kind of separately, because I think that the two are really synonymous. And I know a lot of musicians who kind of neglect to think about it that way, and it kind of hurts them as far as getting outreach as a musician, because it's so important. And I was literally talking to someone the other day and he was like, yeah, like I love making music, but I hate marketing and I hate sales. And I know a lot of people who kind of share a similar opinion, but that's such an important part of it. As a band, you literally are an entrepreneur, and as soon as that shift kind of gets made in your brain is where I feel like success starts to really happen and really starts to kind of come to the forefront, and you start to really make strides with your music.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And like when I finally started realizing that they weren't separate is when it all started coming together. It's like being a artist, you know, and the principles of what it takes to like represent yourself, to market, to do all those things, same exact things that it takes with business and starting businesses and, you know, creating in that way. And it comes from the same creative resource, you know, at least in how I see it. And, you know, if I find, if anything, us as artists actually have an edge on like business. Like we can cut through to people's hearts. We can literally penetrate their souls through our creations and really open them up that way. And then with our ideas and our intelligence, then enroll them logically in their minds. Like we have the edge as artists and creatives. Whereas like, you know, like we get right to the heart of it. And, you know, from a business perspective, I find there's so much flooded, there's so much distraction, there's so much just stuff that's constantly being thrown at us that it can be easy to just like, you know, be numb in some ways. And so I found that leading with my music first has ultimately been not only how I've been memorable to people, but how I've gotten ahead faster, especially in recent years. And so I really think we have superpowers more than those that artists have. So embrace them. And that's been the edge, is the reframe on the merge for me too. So
yeah, I totally agree 100%. It also kind of surprises me too when an artist tells me that they're afraid to market themselves or do sales, because you know, it's something new to a lot of people, but making music is all about being creative and trying new things that might not work, and then failing a few times and then trying again and then getting better a little bit each day until finally something works. And that's exactly what marketing is too.
Yeah, completely.
Jules, unfortunately, we're almost out of time here. I had a couple more questions, though. Can I ask one more? And then I have one final parting question that I ask on every show.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I guess this kind of goes back to the near-death experience. I was just kind of curious. It was going to be my first question I asked afterwards, but were you religious at all beforehand? I typically don't like to talk about religion and politics, but is that or spiritual or anything beforehand or after the fact?
Yeah. So I grew up Catholic. I grew up in a really Catholic family. My mom was one of 6 girls. I was one of 5. And, you know, I didn't subscribe to, like, I don't identify with being Catholic, but I grew up, you know, having that as a frame. But what I have identified with, you know, is having a lot of faith. And for me, after that accident, I have had no doubt in my mind, like a direct experience that there is more. There is another side. And the amount, and to say it simply, the amount of love, like the purest, most divine frequency of love that I've ever felt, I experienced during those moments when we had this conversation. And I mean, there's been several times where I've thought back to it. It's just been total like white noise, elation, like pure joy, like the purest love I've ever felt. And for me, after that, I'm like, God exists. God is real, and I relate to it with God. You know, if you're hearing this, it's like, I'm not saying it has to be God for you, but I'm clear that there is something. I call it God. For me, it became God after that experience. It was like very palpable, and it's been really beautiful. Like since then, since having that, I've now gotten to really come to my own relationship with faith and with God, and not from like this is Catholic and it fits into a box, or this is Christian and it fits into a box, or this is, Judaism and it fits in a box, or Muslim, or whatever it is. But that frequency of love is how I relate to it, as pure God and pure goodness. And it's honestly been the source and access point of all of the creations that have happened since, is basically saying to myself, yes, I am more than just physical bones in a body, and I am a soul. And I think we all have the ability to allow our gifts to flow through us and be created in the world, religious or not religious, faith or not faith. And for me, the more I say yes, I welcome, from this higher place that my gifts get to come through, I find the more they come through. And I've seen that true time and time again for those that come to our unconventional life events and for those that I impact. And so it's been really beautiful to have had that experience and to really come to my own relationship with it.
I think that was really beautifully said, and it kind of aligns with what I believe too. As I kind of thought it would. I told somebody this the other day, and they looked at me like I was a crazy person. But but I kind of look at anything, any higher being or higher power or anything like that. I compare it to the way, like let's say like an ant. It just knows to pick up the rocks and bring it back to the ant colony and like the ant hill and give it to the queen ant or whatever. And it can't even comprehend the fact that we have some sort of consciousness and can have podcasts and conversations like this and make music. All it knows is like grab the rock, bring it back to the anthill as fast as possible, and then give it to the queen ant. And that's okay that for us that we can't even comprehend what it is out there. But I think recognizing that there is something is pretty important, regardless of what anyone's listening, what your religious belief is, or whatever you believe spiritually or religiously. My last and final question is, if you had unlimited money, no strings attached, what would you do and why?
Such a good question. I don't think I would necessarily be doing much differently. And I think it comes back to really this like question of, where do I experience joy? And for so long, I used to think it had to be in something I was doing or something I would get or something I could have that would be the thing that would give it to me. And the more I've realized, it's like being able to just be with myself. Like there's basically a set of principles that make me really epically happy. Getting up in the morning, going to CrossFit, eating really great food, like having the opportunity to be in gorgeous locations. So like I get to travel all over the world. Like we're doing an event in Bali for like 100 entrepreneurs and musicians at the end of the year in November, where we bring together like all these great people to integrate creativity and like up-level life and business for 5 days. And so like, I feel like I'm getting to do a lot of this stuff where it's like, put me by an ocean, put me by mountains, give me a jet. I think that'd be the one thing. If I had unlimited money, I would just have a private jet that I could fly on my own time. So I could literally be back and forth more. And I have such a zest for the world, for cultures, for stories. I'm such a storyteller. I love people. I love connection, which is why I think, Unconventional Life, we do these big masterminding events. And if I had unlimited money, it would be, I would say, to have myself like a jet, so that I had more access to doing it. But the quality of experiences that I'm already having, there isn't much I would change, because I feel really humbled and really blessed with the life that I have. And it's taken me a lot to get here. And now I'm not saying I'm perfect. Like there's moments where I'm like, I am so far behind. I am totally losing my shit. There's no way I can do this. This idea was crazy. And the thing is though that I can have those thoughts and I can still be in action anyways. And if I could part like one thing to the listeners is, I don't think the tapes, the not good enough, like I'm totally crazy, go away, but you get the choice to just be in action and show up in the face of it. And that's what I find moves the needle, is to say, yep, that's here and it's welcome. And I'm still going to show up in this way, and I'm still going to create, and I'm still going to have the life that I say that I want to have because I said so. So, yeah.
That was a great answer. I think you fucking nailed it. And the fact that you wouldn't change much just shows how woke Jules is to the listeners. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you? Maybe your podcast and your Forbes articles and everything?
Yeah. So for those that love podcasts, which you must if you're listening to this, come check out Unconventional Life. You can search it on iTunes. Literally tell stories of amazing people just like Wes, who will be on the show following their own own non-traditional path. And one of the things I love about the show is we kind of take off the masks of who people are in the world. So we introduce them and like, yeah, you're a badass, and let's talk about who you really are. Like beyond the mask, let's get deep. And so those are the kind of conversations, we have. We've had a lot of great musicians and entrepreneurs and Olympian athletes and people on that. So you can check that out. And then if you're someone that wants community and really feels like you have gifts inside of you that you really want to come out, or you want to find your next level in life or business, we do these 5-day life and business accelerators. Inc. ranked us as the top event for entrepreneurs to attend this year. And we were just in South Africa, and we've got one coming up in Bali at the end of the year, November 29th through December 3rd. And you can head over to unconventionallifeshow.com/Bali to check that out. And it's a place, the same thing. It's like all the people that come are really playing at such a high level, but it's not about networking. It's really about making connection, and the people that have your back as like human being first, that can help take your vision, help take your goals and your gifts, whether they're helping you in this moment or a few months from now or a few years from now. It's like really your core tribe. And so I think we've got, a few spots still left for that coming up in November. Another great way to check it out. And then Jules Schroeder, Jules Schroeder. I'm sure we could put the link somewhere, and you can check out my music. I've got a new album coming out with some great artists in September. And I also just love, like I said, connection. So if there's something about this that struck you, and if you feel called to reach out and let's be in contact. And I really think we are all going through an awakening, like as a world and as a society right now. And it's rough out there. Like shit is crazy right now. And I also think it's also beautiful. Like we're all waking up to something really big that's so much bigger than us, is how I see it. And so it's like lighting up the grid with all the fellow light workers all across the world to bring our mission, our music, our initiatives forward. So if this is like, you're like, yes, I'm there, come talk to me. And let's have a conversation. So.
Yeah, dope. There it is. Go hit up Jules Schroeder, everybody. And Jules, thank you so much for being on the Music Journal.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Music Journal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, I just put out a personal EP on Spotify. You can go to bit.ly/Wes Yee Spotify. And if you want to know more about music production, I teach an online course about it too. Just shoot an email to wes@homestudiohits.com and I'll send you an application. Just for filling out the application, I'll send you a free sample pack of sounds I use to make the instrumental you're listening to, and more. All these links will be available in the show notes, so you can check them out there. And while you're there, if you feel inclined to rate this show 5 stars, that would really help me out. Other than that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again. Peace.